let's turn to New York state politics. Nomi, there were 5 ballot measures, and I just want to cop to this right off the bat. Like, I just didn't pay that much attention to them at all. I mean, in my capacity here, professional capacity, I just didn't. And I read up on them the day before I early voted, and I was like, well, all these are good. These are all good measures. There were 3, if I remember correctly, there was 5 ballot measures. One was to make a right of citizens in this state to have clean drinking water and clean air.
And that
essentially
passed.
That passed. There was another one that I can't remember what the second one that also passed. That was also pretty good. There were 3 other voting provisions. Well, 2 of them were voting provisions in terms of like no reason absentee ballot and early voting, and then also freezing the number of state senators. I think it was at 63. And I cannot remember what the 5th measure was, but it was also a good measure and it passed. Somebody want to look that up?
The 5th proposal changed the monetary limit on claims.
Oh, that's what it was.
City's civil court.
Not as sexy, but it allowed basically people to go in and deal with corporations with all the fees associated with going to a higher level court. So it just broadened the jurisdiction of civil claims courts. I heard nothing about these voting ballots. Nothing. And presumably, we've had a lot of complaints in this state about the voting practices of New York State, one of the bluest states in the country, being, worse than, I don't know.
It's the second worst voting system in the country.
Oh,
it was up until the Senate was lost. So lowest turnout just above Louisiana. This is not like Democratic, this is turnout in general because of a lot of the voter restrictive laws that had occurred up until the Senate. There was some early voting, for instance, didn't exist before.
Right.
So these are the types of reforms that took place under a new Democratic Senate under Cuomo. Now, obviously, the landscape has changed. Yeah, I mean, the complaint is, and I'm trying to get the language. I apologize. I didn't have the language handy. I should have done it. If someone can pull up the language, I know there's a New York Times article that shows it. Okay, so it's process. And this is the problem. Sam, it's not your fault. Process is messy. Process is not interesting. Process takes time. Process requires understanding bylaws of the New York Democratic Party and are they able to pass it or does it happen through the Senate? This is the stuff we had to deal with on the Unity Reform Commission when the Democratic Party of New York State, which let's remind everybody is Cuomo's party. This is not a party that represents all Democrats. You have Chuck Schumer didn't like Cuomo. I mean, Kirsten Gillibrand didn't like Cuomo. And they were siding with the anti-IDC movement, which of course, pretty much most Democrats to the left of Cuomo were for, and progressives, of course. But the difference is that during the Unity Reform Commission, we put forward a bunch of measures to improve voter access across the board, but it was very much directed at New York State. And we had the head of the Board of Elections, one of the heads of the Board of Elections, the lawyer for it, come in, who was appointed by Cuomo, by the way, but he's a lawyer and he has a responsibility. And he basically admitted, the Democratic Party can just change this rule. This doesn't have to go through the legislature. And the Democratic Party kept punting and saying, no, the legislature needs to do it. And it's their fault, hence the IDC. So the party itself is not democratic. The people are essentially appointed. They don't announce their process ahead of time, yada, yada, yada. And then also the money, nobody knows where the money goes. Well, we saw with India Walton, a lot of that money went to partner up with Republicans in defeating India Walton against the previous Democratic Party chair, who is responsible for not passing these things, Byron Brown. So now, after the election, you have this guy, Jay Jacobs, who's the head of the Democratic Party. He is a county executive or a leader in Long Island, and Long Island was wrecked. Democrats lost across the board. There's absolutely no representation in Long Island anymore by Democrats. And that is, I will say it, his fault, because he, as Democratic Party chair, was so preoccupied with defeating India Walton and having, which, again, let me just remind folks, Buffalo is not controlled is a county legislature. Like the mayor does not have that much power. So this was all very symbolic. It wasn't about like, she's going to transform the city. She still had to deal with the county, the common council and the county legislature and the county executive, all who have more power than she would have, or Byron Brown has. This was symbolic. This was about defeating the socialists, not giving them any more movement, while they're not spending any money on keeping their existing Democrats in office, existing Democrats who are not even like the left Democrats from downstate. These are like center Cuomo-like Democrats who lost. So why does this matter? Simultaneously, and this is really unpopular, but this is the weeds. When we were on the Unity Reform Commission, we could not get some of these these measures support from progressive organizations who rely on having a ballot line. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So their entire brand is on keeping their like, oh, well, if the Democrats aren't going to do anything, then we'll do something. So come and join our movement.
Well, are you talking about the Working Families Party?
I'm just saying anybody, any organization that has a ballot line. So it was very frustrating for us because, you know, this is voting rights. This is civil rights. This is civil rights.
Just to be clear, you're saying that it's that parties to the left of Democrats get value out of Democrats not doing certain reforms because it makes their ballot line more viable because it gives you a reason to vote for them.
Yep.
I mean, this is, this should be a fairly obvious dynamic to people on some
I
level.
think it is, but nobody says it.
But
they all say it behind the scenes, though.
And you should, and it. The other answer is to push that party to the left. I mean, if the Democrats take a step to the left, everybody else should be taking a step to the left. That's the way that it should be working. And there's also, I think, a difference between like, why are we going to expend money on, reformist policies by Democrats when we have other places that we want to expend our money on? That to me, makes some sense. Others, but you start getting into murkier territory when you're like, we want to prevent this from passing so that we maintain our, but Democrats do this with Republicans too.
Of course, but this is not about the Democratic Party reform. Let me make this very clear. There's nothing about those ballot items that was about reforming the Democratic Party. They previously and actually currently have the power to change those rules internally, at least for their primaries only. Let me make that very clear, for primaries only. This was about voting rights. And if you don't have every single organization to the left of the Republicans supporting basic fundamental voting rights that exist in states like Arizona, then what kind of party are you? And internally, I know that there are state senators and people who we would never partner with on anything that are extremely furious that this party, and I think this is the last time this kind of dynamic is going to exist, because Jay Jacobs, multiple people have called for him to resign because of this and comments towards India Walton and obviously what happened with India Walton. But also he lost Long Island. And like, if you can't deliver your own neighborhood because your eyes are on, they didn't spend any money on it. It's not like, oh, it was because of the Republic. Long Island has a lot of Trumpian Republicans, but you also didn't spend any money there, just like the national dynamic. You didn't care. You were more focused on defeating a socialist, woman of color, union organizer than you were keeping anyone. And that's going to offend a lot of lawmakers who may not necessarily side with progressives, but feel like the Democratic Party does not have their back. And they're going to get angry and feel alienated. And my guess is, based on this last conference that I went to last week on New York politics, there's going to be somebody challenging Jay Jacobs, and there's going to be an internal call for him to step down and major reforms, because this is civil rights. This is not progressive.
So in many respects, what we're still seeing is the flushing out of the system, the Cuomoites, and also still sort of the wake of the flushing of the IDC, right? I mean, all this stuff has yet to sort of like exit the body politic yet, right? I mean, we have some sweating and some defecating and urinating and
conditioning. There's conditioning by people. I think that there are progressive organizations out there who mean well and fought against the IDC and did incredible work on the ground. But there's this conditioning that it's like impossible for them to work with normie Democrats to fight for, so nobody puts any money in. And the result is how many millions of people are not voting that could be voting. And spoiler alert, they're from poor communities.
I mean, on some level, I think it's not surprising that there has been an ossification of a lot of these organizations, because you had a dynamic that seemed impenetrable for a long time. And all of a sudden, Andrew Cuomo is gone, and you've built up your entire organization and the culture of your organization and the mentality of your organization based upon a reality that is fundamentally altered. I mean, I don't think we're going to get in this state a politician like that, maybe ever again, one who's going to have that type of like iron grip across the state, up and down state, transactional with unions. I think we're entering a much better era of democratic politics in New York State, hopefully. And it's going to give a lot more opportunity for some progressive, I think, policy and changes. That's my hope anyways.
I mean, we can only hope. And I think public pressure, so if you're able to speak out and say, Democratic Party, do you not believe in civil rights? Do you not, you're completely abandoning your most basic principles. It was one thing when Cuomo was there to blame the IDC, but he only got away with it because he was able to blame the IDC. Now there's no IDC. The buck stops at Jay Jacobs, and it's not a great look. He doesn't have a foil. Right.
And they should be able to pass this, and they can pass a lot of this stuff in the legislature. Is that right? You don't need a referendum to do it.
Yeah, huh? I mean, we'll see. The session's going to start after the new year, and we'll see. Also keep in mind that there's a tectonic shift happening. There are a lot of people who are running for office now next cycle because of the opening of the governor. It shifts people out. There's, I don't know, like 10 people running for attorney general now. Most of them are existing lawmakers of some sort. The gubernatorial race is heating up already. And then you're going to have a lot of folks in the Senate feel like they can vie for leadership now too, if there's a shift at the top there. So I think people are going to be really, pitching reforms. And that's the time to get them to do this, because the campaigning is going to happen simultaneously while the session's going on. It's not like, when I'm elected and then they can abandon their principles. They can do it while they're running.